Yeah, the Simpson family is a long line of horse thieves, deadbeats, horse beats, dead thieves, and even a few alcoholics.
With over 730 episodes and counting, we've learned a great deal about the Simpsons family. But what about their ancestors? So I thought it was about time we took a deep dive into the convoluted, the eclectic, but the hugely wonderful Simpsons family tree. So, starting at the very beginning, like literally at the dawn of life, we meet Homer's fishy ancestor, who I'll call Homer Shrimpson. He steps out of the water, grew some legs, and only several million years later did he evolve into a mammal small enough to survive the death of the dinosaurs. The Simpsons line then transitioned into ape-like creatures, which isn't much of a change from our dear homie today. And that brings us to Caveman Homer. This earlier Homo sapien differs from our present Homer mainly because of his impeccably toned body. But soon enough, their family resemblance would become clearer when he gets a taste for the first beer ever made. It immediately gave him a beer belly and the family's long history of alcoholism.
To alcohol, the cause of and solution to all of life's problems.
Eventually, Caveman Homer settled down and started a little tribe of his own, and his family life isn't so different to the one he'd live 50,000 years later. The children squabble, and he was scolded for lounging too long in his saber-tooth hammock, all whilst his poor wife did all of the cave chores. So jumping forward to 1220 BC, we come to Homer the Thief. And this guy operated in a bazaar in Egypt and enjoyed fraternizing with Ezron, carver of graven images, and Zohar the adulterer. And it has to be said that Zohar bears a striking resemblance to the bowling instructor called Jack, suggesting his present-day descendant would continue the family legacy of interfering with Homer and Marge's marriage. But when Moses announces the 10 Commandments, Homer the Thief was out of a job.
Thou shalt not steal.
But his stealing tendencies would continue down the line in his family tree, but is now given a totally different name: borrowing.
Sure, you can borrow it for a little while.
And that little while is now 8 years and counting.
So now we come to Bart Beard the Pirate. And it has to be said straight off the bat that this scallywag's resemblance to Bart Simpson is uncanny. Therefore, it's unsurprising why the 10-year-old Hellraiser may have been named after his pirate ancestor. It's not a shock that one of their relatives would take to the seas to raid, pillage and plunder, as Homer would also later display seafaring tendencies himself, inadvertently hijacking a Navy submarine and therefore causing an international crisis. Next up is Winifred Running Goat. Struggling to find inspiration for a school project, Lisa decides to fabricate a Native American heritage, and taking inspiration from her microwave oven, she created the Hitachi tribe. And it was only after she confessed to the lie that Homer revealed that they actually do have Native American ancestors.
My great-great-grandmother was an Indian. I guess I should have mentioned that before, huh?
This is also supported in this family tree right here, taken from the Simpsons Uncensored family album, which shows their Native American ancestry starting with Mary Frowning Cloud and Joe Puffin Goat. And it would have been super useful to have been able to use this throughout the entire video, but with the book being released in 1991, it's a little out of date with the show, and therefore wouldn't be hugely accurate. Next up is Mabel and Virgil Simpson. While digging into her family tree for another school project, Lisa hoped to find a slither of honor amongst the Simpsons clan. Instead, she discovered a long list of deadbeats. Grandpa did try to highlight the nicer Simpsons, such as Abigail Simpson, aka the Pittsburgh Poisoner, and Adam and Eve Simpson, aka the Soviet spies Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, executed in 1953. But of course, not all of Grandpa's stories can be trusted, and it might just be yet another example of his eccentric rambling. And despite Homer and Grandpa's insistence, Lisa still refused to believe that there wasn't a single noble Simpson. So when she stumbled upon the diary of Eliza Simpson from 1860, she peeked into the Simpsons in the Civil War era. One day, she met a slave called Virgil who worked for Colonel Burns, who was the grandfather of the present-day tyrant Mr. Burns. And together, they plotted his escape. But Eliza's diary disintegrated from age, and Lisa and Marge managed to find more of the story in a cookbook published by Mabel, Eliza's mother. In it, they learn that Eliza and Virgil evaded capture by disguising as members of a traveling circus and returned to the Simpsons' home. Hiram was originally reluctant to take in Virgil, but that soon changed when he tried some of his homemade wheel cakes. Unfortunately, as Milford Van Houten's diary would expose, Colonel Burns managed to track down Virgil and manipulate Hiram and Eliza into giving him up. Later, when interviewed by the Springfield Historical Society in 1952, a then 100-year-old Eliza expressed her deep regret and how she was haunted by her cowardice in the face of evil. But the story of Virgil didn't end with Hiram's betrayal. If Grandpa is to be believed, Mabel threatened Colonel Burns and escaped with Virgil. They even received Abraham Lincoln's help on the way to the Canadian border, and so Mabel divorced Hiram to marry Virgil, adopted the Simpsons name, and even had a son called Abraham I.
We're 1/64th black, so that's why I'm so cool.
But we got a completely different tale to how the Simpsons adopted their name in the episode Homer to the Max.
I got it from my father, and he got it from his father, and he traded a mule for it.
The odds are that this is just another one of Abe's bizarre stories, but we can believe that Virgil's son Abraham did have a son called Old Tut, and therefore had a son called Orville, who is Grandpa's dad. Orville's early life is pretty unclear, mostly because Abe is our primary source about him, but what we do know is that he's from the old country, wherever that is, and was married to Yuma Hickman. And together they had around 12 children. They immigrated to America and even lived inside the Statue of Liberty. It's unknown how many siblings Orville might have had, but one was likely to be Homer's great uncle Boris, who left Homer's haunted house in season 5. Tracing down the line, we get to Orville's children, where we find a possible sibling of Abe, Aunt Hortense.
May I offer my condolences on the untimely passing of your great Aunt Hortense.
Apart from the possible sister Hortense, the first of Abe's siblings we meet in the show was brother Hubert, but he wasn't the most lively guy. We also learn about his brother Bill, who Abe publicly outed as a communist while at the House Un-American Activities Committee. He also has a bitter and depressed brother called Tyrone, who lives in Dayton, Ohio.
Why won't I die?
Chet is likely Orville's youngest child, who is perfectly satisfied with running a failing shrimp company. And he also has another brother called Cyrus, who may or may not be real. He was a fighter pilot presumed dead, shot down during the war, and it wasn't until much later did Santa Claus, of all people, take Abe to see his brother, who was now living on a tropical island with many, many wives. But yes, I reiterate, he may not be real, but Santa is. Now we go to Abraham Simpson II, aka Grandpa. If Grandpa doesn't talk much about his relatives, it's probably because he was far too busy serving in the military as a flying hellfish or enjoying a surprisingly eventful romantic life. The first of his children, Abby, was the result of a romantic fling with Edwina while he was stationed in England. He also fathered a second child, Herbert Powell, with a gal he met at a carnival. Previous flings aside, Mona was undoubtedly the most important love of Abe's life, but she abandoned him and Homer when he was just 9 years old and was to be just the first of Abe's 4 wives. That old dog. The Simpsons have relatives everywhere, making it hugely difficult to track their whereabouts and how they're all connected. Marge didn't even realise that Homer has a cousin Frank, who now goes by Mother Shabooboo. Now, Mother Shabooboo hasn't actually appeared in the show, but she may be the woman that Bart mistook Homer for later on in that very same season. In Lisa the Simpson, Lisa fears that the fabled Simpsons gene would affect her intelligence and ruin her future. So Homer rounded up all of their relatives so he could prove that the Simpsons can be successful. But the results spoke for themselves. Second cousin Stanley shoots birds at an airport, another is a millionaire impersonator, and it just gets worse.
I beg celebrities for money.
I'm a prison snitch.
Jug band manager. My legs hurt.
But luckily, this congregation also exposed that the Simpsons women actually became quite successful. Dr. Simpson is the chief of complicated surgery, and others are very high up in the fields of architecture and environmental law. But this theory in this episode of The Simpsons gene is hugely flawed, mainly because Homer is only really dumb because he's got a crayon stuck up his nose, and Uncle Herb is definitely not dumb. Only dumb for allowing Homer into his business. And finally, we come to Homer, who married his high school sweetheart Marjorie Bouvier, and together they raised Bart, Lisa and Maggie Simpson. And sadly, the possibility for a fourth child was thwarted as Homer discovered he was sterile from years of working at the nuclear power plant. But as we found out in the episode Adventures in Baby Getting, Homer revealed that he donated to a sperm bank 15 years ago under the name Thad Super Sperm. So it turns out that Homer actually has countless of other children who he's never met, and it could just be possible that Lester and Eliza are also the result of Homer's donation. But I'll leave that to my Simpsons Theory series to expose. Now let's take a look at the possible future Simpsons. The future episodes of the show aren't considered canon in the main timeline, but they still provide a fascinating tease into what could be in store for the family in the future. Holidays of Future Past depicted Bart as a struggling divorcee and father of 2 boys, Jif and Skippy, with his ex-wife Genda. Meanwhile, Lisa seemed destined to end up with Milhouse, although genetic engineering ensured her daughter Zia only inherited Lisa's genes.
When we had her, they used only the best genetic material, which meant none of mine.
And Maggie Simpson is just as silent as ever, but has also welcomed a brand new baby Simpson into the world.
So, who's the father? It doesn't matter.
We may never see the Simpsons' actual canon future, but it does look like that nothing would stop this Simpsons family tree from growing. That's if that super sperm has anything to do with it. And so that comes to the end of the video. If you want to see more family tree videos on Flanders or even the Bouviers with Marge's disappearing dad, then let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, make sure to subscribe and I'll smell you later.